The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description.
Who else could it be? Me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the command post. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I, of course, am your commander-in-chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Day 7 of training camp, second padded practice of the training camp period. It was my favorite day of camp to this point because there was a lot of action. And what today, and really yesterday, but today kind of piggybacking off of yesterday signifies is the dog days of summer are setting in. The dog days of camp are setting in now. You heard Terry talk about this, and I told you I wasn't going to get into the specifics of what he said because I wanted you to go and watch, and I know a lot of you have watched already, and we'll be referencing that Pivot podcast with Terry McLaurin quite often because there were things that I haven't mentioned that I want to talk about, but I didn't want to talk about because you hadn't seen it yet, and I didn't want to, spoiler alert and all that good stuff. I didn't want to spoil it for you. But one of the things Terry talked about was training camp. One of the things they talked about very early on in the video was training camp. And Terry talked about what training camp represents. Ryan Clark talked about his love for training camp. Channing Crowder talked about how he hates training camp. And Terry was really, specific in talking about how, when you first come out there, it's all this energy, it's all this love, and, you haven't seen your brothers in so long, and you're happy to be back out on the field playing football. It's all great. And then it gets to day 4 and day 5, and it gets hot. Now you put the pads on in day 6 and day 7. Now that dude that you were dapping up on day 1 of camp, you're no longer friends with right now because you're going one-on-one with him and you're trying to kick his ass. And now you're talking shit. And then next thing you know, it comes to blows. And that's where we are now. And that's when this shit gets real, okay? That's what today was. So day 7 of camp had some energy, had a little bit of our first scrap of camp. Camp isn't camp without a scrap. I've never played football in my life and went through a training camp without a scrap or two. So just go ahead and get it out of the way, man. They did that. And let's keep it pushing, but this was some good stuff here. So Eric Bieniemy was on 12 in practice today, as he usually is, but he's usually on 10. He was on 12 today. The officials were at practice today. We got so much to discuss, so let's get right to it. So we heard from Ron Rivera, Cole Turner, and Jonathan Allen from a press conference standpoint. I don't know if you guys saw, but again, I think this is a part of the new aura that is beaming from Commanders Park now because of the ownership change. So we're getting a constant, stream of guests coming to camp, which we generally don't get. Like, we're still slightly disrespected. The NFL Network sent representatives out. So it was called back to something over the weekend. It's BTS, I think it was. Back to the, I'm gonna call it BTF, back to the field, but it was called something else. Or it might have been back to camp or something like that for all the teams. Remember, I talked about that. And the NFL Network sent a representative from the NFL Network to all 32 teams or so. We thought they were going to send a representative to all 31 teams. For instance, Daniel Jeremiah was sent to Indy to cover the Colts. And some places got 2 or 3 guys or females, to go out to these camps. We got nada. We were the only NFL team to not get an NFL Network representative. Instead, they said, hey, Julie Donaldson can handle it, which is fine. We're not complaining. It's just another example of, hey, while there's a lot of good juju going around right now and everybody's feeling us, hey, we still the Commanders at the end of the day. So we still have a narrative to change. Just in case we're not on the same page. So Kay Adams is at practice now. And I saw an interview with her and Antonio Gibson, a little snippet of that. And so she's there. So I'm assuming that she's probably got a bevy of interviews with players. They probably gave her 5 or 6 players to pick off that she talked to. So again, we're in demand. So keep your eyes peeled. There's a lot of Commanders content out there if you want it. Okay. Anyway, let's go over what was said at the podium, and then we'll get to the day itself of practice, because there were a couple of things that I wanted to mention yesterday, and I'm glad I didn't because they tie in beautifully today. Okay. So Ron, the beauty of having a presser before practice is that the media doesn't know what is about to transpire at practice or who isn't going to be on the field at practice. And Ron knew who was and wasn't going to be on the field. So the beauty of camp, and Ron doesn't have to disclose anything if he doesn't want to. I mean, after practice, they can ask and he can say, I don't have to tell you anything, because he's done that before. I don't have to tell you anything. I'm not mandated by the league to tell you anything, so I won't. So you don't necessarily get all of the information, but the questions are going to be asked if this were post-practice. But Ron spoke to the media prior to practice, and he said, I'm glad to be here talking to you before practice and not after. And you can tell because his presser today was 15 minutes. When it's after practice, it's usually just a shade under 10. So a little bit longer. And he talked about, the tempo to practice and how they've upped that with Eric Bieniemy. And he talked about something that I talked about yesterday, and I've talked about before in the past, but specifically I talked about yesterday because of the up and down nature of the offense, and making sure that you guys have patience with the offense, because they're going to be growing pains. The defense is in year 4 of Jack Del Rio's scheme, year 2 of the zone match scheme. So they should be very acclimated. And I think Jonathan Allen kind of hit the nail on the head there. We'll get to Jonathan Allen and his comments on some of the things he had to say. But one thing in particular that he did say was, we don't have to worry about learning the defense, figuring out what we have to do. Now we can go a step further and start finding ways to tweak what we're doing, how to fine tune that, how to adjust and alter it so that it makes it even better, to be more effective. We're not worried about how do we even do this. Now we're talking about how do we make it better. So that's where the defense is. The offense isn't there. They're in the infant stages. They are learning. And Ron said, I just got to make sure you understand, we're not game planning out here. And Eric Bieniemy is putting a lot on the offense's plate. Like, he's throwing a ton at them, and they're having to digest this quickly. And he's not slowing down for anybody. He's throwing a lot of these guys, and the ones who can swim, all right, he's throwing them in the deep end, and the ones that can swim, they're going to play. And the ones that are sinking, that can't swim, those are the ones that aren't going to be on the field. But he's throwing a lot at them. Ron said, look, he's got over 360 plays in the playbook. We're not game planning. We're not shrinking that playbook and specifically going into a game plan for a specific opponent where you're only focusing in on 45 to 40 plays, in a course of a week to go out and try to execute to take advantage of your opponent. We're throwing a whole 360 at them, chunks at a time. And they've got to retain this information. And there are going to be mistakes. And so they got to do all of this stuff on the fly. The defense isn't having to deal with that. So he made mention of that, talked about the tempo in practice, talked about the officials. So today was the first day that the officials were out at Commanders Park for practice. They're going to do, I think they did a presentation today. So there are new rules, as there are usually every year. The rules committee gets together. Ron is on the rules committee. And they come in, explain the new rules and any other questions that players may have. They're at practice, officiating the practices, especially the periods where they go 9-on-7 or 7-on-7 or 11-on-11, and they're throwing flags, and the players have a chance to go up to the official and ask, hey, what did you see there? Why did you throw the flag? And get a little bit more understanding as to what is a penalty and what isn't a penalty. And, maybe even how can I bend the rules a little bit and get away with something? Because there's a penalty on every single play. You can throw a flag on every single play. There's holding on every single play. All right. There isn't a single snap that happens where, whether it's defensive holding or offensive holding, there isn't a single snap that occurs that holding doesn't take place. But how can you get away with it? Most plays, pass plays, they're in a single pass play that doesn't have some form of pass interference on it, whether it's offensive or defensive. How can I get away with it? Jason Witten has made a career. He's going into the Hall of Fame off of a push-off that he would do, but it was so subtle, and he had perfected it that they never called it, right? It's all about figuring that stuff out, and those officials are not necessarily there to help them bend the rules, but if you're smart, you'll figure out, all right, I can get away with a little something. But Ron talked about the officials being out there and above all else, he talked about the quarterback position because that's a topic of conversation that is always going to come up. And he said, look, all of the quarterbacks are doing good things, but don't forget about Jacoby Brissett. And I like what he's doing here. I understand what he's doing. I like what he's doing. Again, don't fall for the banana in the tailpipe. Sam Howell has to be garbage. I mean, absolute garbage can juice to not be week 1 starter. So, and trust me, Ron understands Jacoby Brissett isn't saving his job. He's no dummy, okay? But he's going to continue to talk him up, continue to talk about how all the quarterbacks are doing really good things. It's Sam Howell's job. But he talked about Sam's maturation and how Sam's seeing things and becoming more of a vocal leader. So Cole Turner talked about that too. We'll get to Cole Turner's comments here in a second. And then Ron also talked about Terry McLaurin as a leader. And, of course, the media had seen the Pivot podcast with Terry, as most of us did. And Ron hadn't. So they brought it up, talked about some of the things Terry had said. And, Ron just responded to that. And Ron said, look, I talked about maturity being something because Terry talked about feeling like this is the year that he feels like this team can finally take that next step. He feels like all the pieces are here. And he also feels like there's an attention to detail that was lacking from this team in past years. He feels like these guys are locked in and they're ready to go out and pretty much shock the NFL. So, Ron, his response to that essentially was, look, I talked about maturity, talked about these guys preparing themselves, and you're seeing that. You're seeing the leaders on this team step up and fill those roles. And that's what Ron has been trying to get guys to do here. He had that system in Carolina where he had a Thomas Davis. He had a Greg Olsen. He had a Luke Kuechly. These guys went out and they policed the players. Ron didn't have to do that. And that's what he's looking for here in Washington, and it's starting to happen. And he's like, now, a guy like Terry McLaurin is really starting to assert himself more vocally. He even used the E.F. Hutton reference where he said, when Terry speaks, everyone listens. So, you're seeing some of those things kind of come out and come to fruition with Terry as a leader, because Terry was one of those guys that was more of a leader by example. And we saw it last year. We saw a lot of those, post-game victory speeches. Who was leading the charge? Usually it's one or two guys, right? It's either Jonathan Allen or it's Terry McLaurin. So, those are the two guys on those respective sides of the football that are the leaders, right? But you're seeing other guys kind of step into those leadership roles as well and aren't afraid to step up and speak. And so that's what you need, and as you get older and you become more veteran, like Jonathan Allen was at the podium and he said, this is year 7. And I'm thinking to myself, damn, year 7? Doesn't feel like it, but time flies, right? As you get up there, now you're the veteran in the locker room. Now you're the guy players are going to and looking for advice from. So, yeah, it's good to see that. And now your best players are your leaders, and they're in the prime of their career. So this is the year. This feels like the year where we need to start turning the corner. Cole Turner spoke, and he talked about the tight end position group as a whole. Someone brought up their size. It's a big room. We talked about it. The Arizona State kid is 6'8". Cole Turner is 6'5", 6'6" himself. Logan Thomas is 6'6", 6'7". John Bates is 6'5". It's a big room, all right, essentially. And so someone brought that up, and he said, yeah, we have similar skill sets. We're interchangeable. We savages out here. We trying to get after it, essentially. But he talked about Sam, and he said, I'm seeing a lot of the same things. He said, it's like deja vu. I'm seeing a lot of the same things from Sam that I saw from him at the Senior Bowl. That when we first got to the Senior, remember, they're in the same draft. They were drafted in the same round, right? Both fifth-round picks, Cole Turner and Sam Howell, in that 2022 NFL draft. And he said, that week of the Senior Bowl, we got there early on. Sam wasn't really saying much. As the week progressed, his voice got louder. And by the end of the week, he was a leader, and he was asserting himself, and he was vocally stepping out to the forefront. And he says, I'm seeing a lot of that. Last year, you're a third-string quarterback. You're not getting many reps. He kind of was in the background. This year, he's, the guy that we're looking to be our starter. And he's seizing the opportunities. He's stepping up. His voice is being heard. He's commanding the huddle. And so I'm excited about what Sam can do. So he kind of spoke to that. Also talking about EB's offense, Cole Turner said, look, we didn't get a lot of opportunities last year. The offense wasn't really set up for us to get a lot of opportunities. This year, it's set up for us to flourish, and we got to take advantage of these opportunities. And it's been a lot of fun playing in this offense that is going to give us opportunities. So, just a little slight veil shot at Scott Turner. And, we ain't really trying to rehash the past, but we are acknowledging that these boys didn't get opportunities last year. So, Cole Turner talked about, a bevy of topics. And he also said, look, man, I got a couple nicks and bruises, but I'm good. It's camp, nothing I can't play through. Let's play some ball. So, Jonathan Allen, El Capitan, we all know what he's about. This is a dude that, kicks ass, takes names, no prisoners, balls to the wall. He's talking about taking care of his body better and just being mindful of, look, I don't have to go hard, all the time. Like when I'm off the field, I just got to take care of my body. He talked about his wife being being, I think, like a sports therapy, like a physical trainer in sports in some sort of way. I forgot what he said she was. And she may be a nutritionist too. So he's like, she's helping me take care of my body and being smarter off the field. But, he talked about the defensive line. And this is how I know in that group, this is a real conversation that's being had, because now he's the second defensive lineman that I've heard talk about the D-line being the focal point of the team, being the dominant group and wanting to take over games. Deron Payne mentioned that. Now Jonathan Allen comes and says, hey, we feel like we're, that unit of the team that needs to step to the forefront. We feel like we're the best on the field, and we got to dominate games. And so that's something that he was talking about. And he talked about the entire defense, but really the D-line making plays and how it's interconnected with the back half. And he's like, yo, we got dogs on defense. Like, we really feel like this is a really good unit that we putting on the field, and we think we got a chance to be special, but we got to go out and do, John's not big on, predictions, and he's not big on, potential, none of that shit. He's told us that in the past. So his thing is, hey, let's just go out and do it every single day. Every single day, let's go out and be better than the day before and let our actions speak for themselves. I'm not here to do a whole bunch of talking. There was conversation surrounding the amount of plays in practice, because as Ron talked about, the tempo has been upped by Eric Bieniemy. The tempo is a lot faster. They're getting more plays off. in the amount of time because Eric Bieniemy doesn't want any walking on the field. We're going to talk about that here in a second because he was on 12 today. And so because of that tempo, you're getting more done in the amount of time that you're out there. And so John is like, bro, that's not anything new to me. If he said, look, if you went to Alabama like I did, and there's several Bama players on the roster, we're used to this. This is what we're accustomed to. This is not new to us. We are used to this level of practice. Now, it might have been a little bit different here, but that doesn't bother me. So I think, and I thought he made a great point, something that I haven't really thought about. He said, in reference to some of the slow starts to seasons or, guys struggling in week one in particular, he said, a lot of times guys get mentally fatigued. They get so amped. And if you've ever played in a big game before, and it doesn't matter at what level, we've all played in big games before, and you know how mentally fatiguing they can be and how draining they can be if you allow it to be. You get to, basketball, you get to the opening tip and your heart's just, beating. And then they throw the jump ball and you start playing ball. And it's, the first 2-3 minutes you run up and down the court and you're exhausted, right? Because you're so amped and then you just settle in, right? Eventually, as you keep playing, you settle in, but you're amped for the first 2-3 minutes of the game. Baseball, same thing, especially if your team's up to bat first. If you're in a field, it gives you an opportunity to settle in. If you're at the plate and you're one of the first 3 hitters in the lineup, your shit is just, because you're going up to the plate, you're trying to set the tempo in the game, right? Same thing with football. That opening kickoff, you got all this built up tension and energy. They kick that thing off and you get on the field, whether you're going out first defensively or you're on offense and you got to wait. But there's so much anticipation for that week one. There's been so much put into it because you're game planning for week one, 2-3 weeks, in August, right? Like they're already starting to look at their week one opponent, so it's a lot. And he's like, man, a lot of these dudes are so spent that there's just nothing left in the tank. And so you got to gauge that, and you got to keep yourself somewhat even keel because, you could be spent by the end of the first quarter if you're not careful. But I thought that was an interesting take because I know exactly what he's referring to. But anyway, those were the guys that we heard from today. So let's get to some of the particulars of camp today. It was a really, really interesting day, to say the least. Saahdiq Charles, let's start there. Out of practice today with a calf injury. Chris Paul was in with the first team. This is the thing that we were afraid of with Saahdiq Charles. This is what we've been talking about since he was drafted in 2020. He cannot stay healthy. This is his last chance to prove that he can start for this team. He may go somewhere else and the injuries may cease and he may play well and end up being a 13-year pro. But the likelihood is if he doesn't make it here, he's going to be a journeyman. He's going to bounce around from camp to camp, and then he's probably going to be out of the league in 2 or 3 years after he leaves here. That's the likelihood if this trend continues and he can't stay healthy. So, look, we don't know the severity of the calf injury. Let's not go bananas with it, but it's not a good look for a guy that talked about changing his nutrition this offseason and some of his work habits and feeling like he was turning a corner. This is not what you really want to hear, that he was not able to practice today due to a calf injury. And this is why I said Ron was probably happy that he didn't have to face the media after practice, but rather before, because he knew that they weren't going to have, him on the field today and that he would be asked about it. I think Kendall Fuller wasn't out there today. I don't know if there's an injury that's attached to that. Could have just been a veteran off day. I don't know if you're giving those out this early in camp. You just were off on Sunday. It could be anything. But at the end of the day, that's not a good look for Saahdiq Charles. And Chris Paul, by all accounts, handled himself well, in getting those reps today. We'll see what happens. I was rooting for Saahdiq Charles, but at this point, man, you can't count on him, and I feel bad. for even saying that, because again, I don't know the severity of the calf strain, but if it's a significant enough calf injury, just like we saw with Joe Burrow, he's not going to be back in enough time to make an impact. So before the season starts, rather. So look, we already weren't all that thrilled with the offensive line. We talked about the depth or the lack thereof. Maybe I think there is depth, but maybe tapping into that thing a little bit sooner than we all anticipated. We'll see. So we got our first scrap of camp. All right. First blows being thrown. Camp isn't camp until we get a little bit of some, fireworks going. And so Cody Barton and Nick Gates got into it. And you know what? I'm not surprised by Nick Gates. I've heard from Giants fans, and he's, even listening to him talk, I've heard about his fiery personality and how he can be super competitive. I wasn't expecting that from Cody Barton, though. I'm a little surprised. I'd be lying to you if I told you I wasn't surprised about Cody getting in the mix there. But Cody, like, man, let me just tell you straight up, bitch, my mama ain't no hoe, bitch, my daddy ain't no hoe, bitch, my sister ain't no hoe. Why you trying to play me like a hoe? And so he had to let Mr. Gates know he ain't no hoe. And he started throwing them things. He started throwing them hands. I'm like, I don't know if that's the smartest thing to do. Football players always, it's natural instinct to just start throwing them things and letting them go. But I'm like, he got on a helmet, right? Like, you might actually hurt yourself. So I'm always like, I was thinking about one time, Jordan Reed got ejected from a game. I don't know if y'all remember that. And he straight stole a dude with his helmet on. I'm like, Jordan. And Jordan squared up. He like, pop. He threw a nice firm jab, pop, and snapped it back, and he was ready. And another dude came up, and Jordan turned to him like, yo, you want some of this too, old man? And he was like, no. But I'm like, Jordan, you like, your craft is centered around your hands, bro. You could fracture your hand doing that. Like, don't do that. And I don't think a lot of these guys be thinking, like, it's just the heat of the moment. You get into a little beef, a little skirmish, and then next thing you know, you throwing hands. Not the smart. Like, if you're going to do something, slap them. Like, open hand. That way you're not breaking nothing. But anyway, Cody Barton let go a nice little combination, I heard. But it was quickly broken up. It dissipated. Why? Because Eric Bieniemy came over screaming at the top of his lungs, and I quote, "Get in the huddle, quit wasting effing time." And that quickly broke that up, and they retreated to their respective corners, okay? This was the first of many occurrences in day number 7 where Eric Bieniemy's voice was heard loud and clear. Now, I didn't mention this yesterday, but he made them get back in the huddle several times because of lack of speed and just discombobulation, and made them go and do it over again, made Sam make the call over again and make them do it faster, right? So this has been somewhat of an issue. He wants tempo, right? Get to the line of scrimmage as fast as possible. It gives you more times to make adjustments at the line of scrimmage. The faster you get the play call in, the faster we are able to get into that huddle, the faster we can separate, get to the line of scrimmage, and then we can get these shifts, because it's a lot of shifts, pre-shift, pre-snap motions going on, that we can get to those, see what the defense is in, zone versus man, and then we can start to operate at a high level. So he's been promoting that, and he's practicing definitely what he's been preaching. So Bieniemy also screamed, "Get him in the effing huddle. Enough with all the effing walking." That was another direct quote from Eric Bieniemy. Get him in the effing huddle. I'm assuming he's talking to the quarterback, whomever was out there at the time. Enough with all the effing walking. So, and one of the fans in the stands was like, "Yeah, get him, dog." So, I mean, Eric Bieniemy not playing right with these dudes. And then, so kind of piggybacking off of that, I talked about more going on in practice, more snaps, more reps, just more activity overall, right? Per Nikki Javala, who is another great follow. If you're a fan of the team, you should be following all of the beat writers because they're going to be providing, especially during camp. You know, their information is vital, right? So Nikki Javala tweeted this out. She said, no standing at practice this year. On the far field, blitz pickup and routes with tight ends and running backs, right? So on the far field, you got the tight ends and the running backs working on blitz pickup. The tight ends are working on running routes. And so great, right? Getting some work over there for those position groups. She said on the near field, it is split into O-line versus D-line drills. And then you got on the left, we got the wide receivers versus DBs on the right. So on the left, you got O-line versus D-line. And then on the left, you got wide receivers versus DBs. So everybody's getting some work in, right? No wasted, space, no wasted time, no standing around as it was in past years during practice. Antonio Gibson, let's talk about Gibby because we've been having this discussion. I know I felt like I've been pretty adamant that they were probably going to take him off of kickoffs this year. If they can find somebody else to do it, I think they were going to remove him. I'm having second thoughts, though, because yesterday, and I meant to bring this up yesterday, but I'm glad I didn't because I saw even more evidence of it today. Yesterday, Antonio Gibson was seen fielding punts, all right? And, fielding normal punts and then fielding these tosses from one of the coaches who's in front of him, throwing the ball up into the air, and Antonio Gibson simulating, catching a punt. Now, you can't simulate punts. Punts are so much different than kickoffs. Again, punts, you got guys screaming down, running, 18, 19, 20 miles an hour, full speed at you, looking to tear your head off. And you got to make a split-second decision. Can I return this, or do I need to call a fair catch, or should I get the hell out of the way? Right? You got to make one of those three decisions, and you got to make it like that, right? And you add in different elements. It's windy outside. It could be inclement weather, so it could be raining, anything. These are all things you have to factor in too. So it's not an easy job, and you don't want to just put anybody back there, especially if they've never really truly done it. So, but I've seen him fielding punts. That's not something he did last year. I'm not sure if he's ever really truly done that before. But with that said, something to take into consideration. Then he was fielding kickoffs today, was Antonio Gibson, along with, and I think these are the guys that are both in the punt and kickoff discussion. Like if you're going to make the team, similar to what we said 2 years ago about DeAndre Carter and last year about Dax Milne. If you're making the team, you're making the team because you're not only fielding kickoff punts, you're also going to field kickoffs, which Dax Milne did to start the season. And then he was so bad on kickoffs that they said, okay, you just keep doing punts. We'll get somebody else back on kickoffs. And really it was supposed to be Antonio Gibson doing the kickoffs and having the kick return duties. But then remember, Brian Robinson got shot and that changed everything. But you got Antonio Gibson fielding punts and kickoffs to start camp, along with Byron Pringle. We just talked about him getting here last week. Kaz Allen, the undrafted rookie out of UCLA. And then Dax Milne. Wow, 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 wow. Yeah, Dax is still back there. So, hey, worst case scenario, there's always Dax, right? But Gibby is interesting because I think they're going to utilize him in a multitude of ways. Running, catching, returning, you name it. I think he's going to be doing it this year. I am fascinated with Antonio Gibson's role this year. And it's a contract year. This is a big year for him. So really fascinated by how they may, deploy him this year in so many different ways. The officials were at practice today. I mentioned that already. I only bring it back up again because EB was yelling at the officials too. All right. At one point, EB yelled at the officials to get the hell out of the way. So they were in the way of one of the plays they were running. And he said, hey, y'all get out the way. Okay. So even the officials are getting work too. Okay. Nobody's safe. Let's talk about Sam Howell to wrap up the day of practice today. It was an uneven day for Sam Howell and all of the quarterbacks, not just singling out Sam. None of them were really all that great for stretches of the day today. They had their moments where they did some good things, but largely in part, by and large, I should say, it was a rough go of it for them today. And a huge part of the reason why the D-line is killing it right now. They are wrecking practice at times. And this is why they don't want this is why a lot of times they'll have the first team O go against the second team defense, because it's hard for them to get shit done when the first team defense is just killing the first team offense. So in one-on-one drills, Jonathan Allen ran over a couple of those backup offensive linemen, like Aaron Montero ran over him, ran over another dude. It just destroying the interior offensive lineman, right? In the 11-on-11s, there's pressure being applied. Guys are getting in the backfield. They're making it tough on these quarterbacks. They even today they switched it up, and our rookie Emmanuel Forbes, they sent him on a corner blitz today and caught Sam off guard. Terry's wide ass open, but because nobody accounted for the rookie coming off the corner, he was in Sam's face. Sam kind of panicked a little bit, and he missed Terry wide open, right? On a throw that he's got to make. And, again, these are the kinks that you work out in camp. But it's good to see them utilizing cat blitzes with Emmanuel Forbes, a guy that runs a sub 4.4. It's good to see them doing that. But they're struggling because of the pressure that's being applied to them by this defense. And in conjunction with learning a new offensive scheme. So, again, these are the growing pains of learning a new system, going up against a top flight defense that's light years ahead of where you are. And it's all a part of the process. I'm not flinching. As a matter of fact, Ron talked about Sam, and I thought he said something that I think it was the most impactful thing he said since the start of training camp in regards to Sam Howell. And Ron brought up that we won't really know until we get into real life game situations. Like, we can sit here and talk about what he did in practice, what he did in a scrimmage. We won't know until we put him in these game situations. The preseason will tell the story. So, and that's kind of where I am with this offensive line. I know a lot of you are concerned. I'll be concerned if we get to the first preseason game and they can't block anybody. I'll be concerned if we get to the second preseason game and it's much of the same. Now I'm like, we're in some trouble here, But if they, all of this noise we're making, we get to the preseason and they dominate in the first preseason game, they do the same exact thing in preseason game number 2, I'm not going to be as concerned. I get it, it's preseason, and maybe you didn't face a team playing their starters. I don't care. I just want them to be able to take care of business in a game setting. So we'll see what happens. And he's like, when it comes to Sam, the retention, the execution, all of that stuff, we'll be able to gauge that once the games start. And we're not there yet. So it was another uneven day for all of the quarterbacks, not just Sam Howell. Jacoby Brissett, Jake Fromm, all of those guys are continuing to struggle somewhat against the defense and, just learning a new system. So that was day number 7 in a nutshell. Let's get to the comment section and then we'll get out of here. Got a super and I got a comment from a member. So Mr. Pink, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, 2012, after the wild card game, Trent smacked Sherman. But the difference was they didn't have helmets on, I don't think. I think both of them, Trent might have had his helmet on. I don't think Dick Sherman had his helmet on. But I just know he didn't care for him all that much. Dick Sherman always has something to say. So Trick was in his feelings. I'm not sure if that was after the wild card game or if it was after the Monday night game that we lost to them. Either way, it was somewhere in there. The one where a rap post said we went toe to toe with the best team in football. Yeah, and he wanted a cookie, a beverage, and a bag of chips for that. He wanted a gold star for coming close. And you want to know why we were losers in those days, right? Freddie Lee, thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Member for 21 months. Bravo. Bravo. Almost 2 years, my guy, Freddie Lee. Says, EB going to change this offense from one of the worst to one of the best. Barring us getting decimated with injury, knocking on a little bit of wood. Go ahead and do that for you. Backed by top 10 defense, we about to get spicy. It can get real spicy real quick. I like where this is heading. I like what he's instilling in the players. You know, the tempo, you know, the discipline. Again, the thing we heard the most coming out of Kansas City is accountability. Eric Bieniemy holding players accountable. It seems like he's bringing that same attitude and demeanor here, right? Holding players accountable, forcing the tempo, making sure that he brings the energy every single day, and holding those players to a standard that is nothing less than excellence. Like, we're not going to continue doing the things that have landed you in mediocrity these last 3 years. We're going to up the stakes and the ante. So I love it. Want more of it. And apparently we're going to continue to get more of that from EB as camp wears on. So this is who he is. This is not a front. This is not him trying to be more vocal because he's in a role that requires him to be. This is who he is. This is what he was in Kansas City, and this is what he is here. So I'm excited about all the changes that are being made, and I hope it benefits us, you know, come the regular season when the wins and losses count for real. Let's see. Got another super chat. This one is from Red Wings 01. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, it's nice to hear Craig Hoffman and Logan Paulson talk about Sam since they say it like it is. Logan brought up a good point that in 2012 camp, the D dominated the O and it prepared them for the season. And this is what I keep trying to explain to y'all. Like, when Robert Griffin III was a rookie in 2012 and Logan Paulson was a part of that team, so he can speak very candidly about that. And I've listened to Craig Hoffman and Logan Paulson, and Paulson always references the 2012 season, and they talk about that quite a bit. You know, they were better off. Now, granted, the 2012 defense was not great. However, they were ahead of the offense because the defensive coordinator was Jim Haslett at the time, and he got there with Mike and Kyle in 2010, right? So the defense had already been there and implemented. That was their third year in that defensive scheme, so they were comfortable already. Meanwhile, this is a offense that Mike and Kyle had already implemented and installed, but they were still turning over the roster, right? I mean, we were going out to battle with guys like Keeland Williams and Ryan Terrain and, you know, Anthony Armstrong. Like, these are the guys that we were sending out there and trying to win football games with at receiver and running back. And so 2012, it was like a full turnover of the offensive roster. You had two new quarterbacks come in, Kirk Cousins, Robert Griffin III. You had a new running back and Alfred Morris come in there. You had, you know, new receivers. What's my guy's name? I don't know if he was a part of that draft or the year before. I think he might have been the year before. Aldrick Robinson. That's who I was thinking of. But I think 2012 was Pierre Garçon's first year. So that was a new offensive scheme for him. So you could see that there was a lot of changes. Logan Paulson, I think 2012 was his first year in Washington. So there were so many changes going on at that time. And yeah, you expect the offense to be behind the defense. This is not uncommon, which is what I keep trying to explain to everyone out there. But you know, it's received a lot better when it comes from someone like a Logan Paulson, because they've been in it, they've experienced this. Ron is talking about this same dynamic all the time, and so it's real. This is a real thing. That's why I'm not tripping. And I tell y'all, you don't have to feel the way that I feel, but I'm cool, calm, and collected because I'm expecting this. If it were the other way around, I would be worried about the defense. Like, what are you guys out here doing? I don't want to hear that my quarterback is shredding my defense in practice every day. That's a problem for me. I expect the defense to be ahead of the offense. So I'm not surprised when I hear that the defense is having its way. They should. It's a new scheme. You got 4 new offensive linemen playing in different spots. You got a first-year quarterback, essentially. You know, 1 start under his belt in the NFL, and he's learning a new offense for the second year in a row. 2 years, 2 different offensive coordinators. Yeah, I look for some bumps in the road. So makes a lot of sense, and I hope that similar to 2012, the offense is prepared so much better because of the bumps that they take in training camp. I mean, remember, week 1, we came out and we scored 40 points. And if you remember that 2012 season, it wasn't because the offense was stagnant in most of those games. It was because the defense, we lost shootouts in that season. You know, that game to Atlanta, we could have won that game if the offense was better, but the defense wasn't great. And there were other games in that season where we gave up points. You know, and the offense had to outscore the opposition or else we would have lost. So I'm encouraged. Thank you for that. Red Wing 01. Fat Mike, thank you for being a member of the MOBB, member for 15 months. Over a year. Really appreciate you, Fat Mike, who writes, "What's up, Lou? I think this D-line is going to win us a lot of games this year. 10-plus sacks for all 4 starters. That would be excellent. I am not banking on that. That's a lofty expectation to set, but I would love for all 4 of the starters to be hovering around a dime, you know, and with 1 or 2 of them exceeding it. That'd be great. I'll take a couple of 8.5s, an 11, and a 12.5. That's what you're aiming for right there. If you could get 4 dudes hovering around a dime, oh, you killing it up front. You know, what I just described to you is roughly 40 sacks between 4 dudes. That's a team for the teams that are, you know, at the bottom of the totem pole in sacks. That's their number for the year, 40. You get that with 4 dudes, you're going to have other guys that get sacks on the team. They're not going to be the only ones that get sacks. You get 40. That's why the Eagles were killing it last year, because you had 4 guys over 10 sacks last year. Well, shit, that puts you at 40 right there with 4 guys over 10. 40 plus. That's why they were approaching the NFL record. That'd be great. Frankie, yo. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Member for 15 months. Over a year. Really appreciate you. Frankie, yo, who writes, "Sweet, this thing works now." Yeah, it does work now. I'm excited. Finally. StreamYard made the necessary changes to make this thing work. I'm excited about that. He says, "Thanks for the best Commanders content. So excited for games to start." As am I. I'm so glad that we're getting into these periods now where it's building that excitement. The anticipation is building, right? For that first preseason game. We can't wait. I mean, and it's going to be trash, just like the Hall of Fame game tomorrow. Going to be absolutely garbage can juice. But we're going to be, you know, I won't say we. Some people will be amped for that game. You're not going to see any starters on either side in that game, just so you know. by the time we get to week 1, our preseason game of the preseason, we're going to see starters. I already told you, you're going to see a ton of the offensive starters. I don't know how long the defense is going to be out there for, because if they handle their business, I can see them getting out of there really quick. But the offense, I wouldn't be shocked if they played 2 or 3 possessions, depending on how well they play on the early possessions, will dictate how long they'll have to stay in the game. If you're going 3 and out, or you get 1 first down and you got a punt, they're going to be out there for a while. If they go down, they got a 12-play drive, they cap it off with any kind of score, touchdown, field goal, doesn't matter. They're going to get out of there relatively quick in the first preseason game. But if they're struggling, you can see them for up to 3 or 4 possessions. So anyway, I digress. I'm getting excited too. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Frankie, Fat Mike, Red Wing 01, Freddie Lee, Mr. Pink, and all of you. Got another super chat. This one is from Christopher McLaughlin. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you, my guy. Chris, thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Writes, hey, Lou. Hope all is well with you and the family. Likewise, Chris. He says, do you expect to see an increase in penalties in the first few games with the offense getting used to a new scheme and the O-line and QB learning to work together? Not necessarily. I don't know if that necessarily goes hand in hand, that you're going to have more mistakes. This is what camp is for. I expect those to happen in camp, and that's probably what's going on. Like, for instance, today, Bieniemy Brown had a touchdown negated because there was illegal touching on the play. This has nothing to do with new offense or anything like that. Just it's a mistake. Bieniemy Brown stepped out of bounds. You can't be the first to come back in bounds and touch it, and he was, and so he was flagged for it. So it negated the touchdown. Like, these are the things you got to clean up. You can't have that in the regular season. But I don't anticipate a ton of penalties. Like, there's no excuses for penalties, none whatsoever. So and you'll never hear a coach make any excuses for penalties, because penalties are mental mistakes, whether they happen pre-snap or post. It's mental mistakes. Now, a coach can deal with post-snap penalties more so than pre-snap penalties, because pre-snap penalties is all mental. It's all mental. Nothing physical about a pre-snap penalty. You move too soon, you line up wrong, you shift, 2 guys shifting, and you snap the ball, or you don't reset. That's all mental. Okay, you can avoid that. Holding, you get your ass beat off the snap, and now your only recourse is to hold. That's a physical penalty. You can live with that. You don't want them, but you can live with that. You're 7 yards downfield, and as a corner, you just grab a little bit to stay in phase with that receiver. That's a physical penalty. You don't want it, but you can live with those, right? You don't want the pre-snap penalties. Those are avoidable. Montez Sweat kills me because he lines up off sides. Like, bro, you just got to look down the line. Your damn half your helmet is on the other side of the ball. You got to see that and move back. That's pre-snap. That's mental. Move back, bro. Right? That is not acceptable. Unacceptable. So I don't think you're going to see a rash of penalties from this offense because it's a new system. With EB being, as demonstrative as he's been, cracking the whip and settling for nothing less than excellence, I can't see how you can come out and have a ton of mistakes mentally. And, Terry said this during the Pivot podcast, and it was early in camp, but he said, we're not having a lot of MAs. He said a lot of the things that are happening is just physical. We're not having MAs. MAs are missing assignments, right? You're not missing assignments. So that's the thing you worry about when it's a new offense. Guys missing assignments, guys making mental mistakes. I don't expect that. But we'll see. Thank you for the super chat, Christopher McLaughlin. Got another one. I got a comment here from my guy, Red Wing 01. Member for 10 months. My guy, Red Wings, love you to death. Really appreciate all the support. Red Wing White writes, hype for Kellen Mond versus Zach Wilson. I'm hyped for Zach Wilson. Not necessarily Kellen Mond, but I'm hyped for Zach Wilson because, I'm like, his storyline on Hard Knocks is what I'm probably most intrigued by. They got to follow him. They got to talk about last year and how bad it went for him and how poorly he played and what Aaron Rodgers showing up could mean for him and what it's done to his psyche. The team hasn't quit on him yet, but going out and getting Aaron Rodgers pretty much signifies that we don't think you're the guy for the job. But that doesn't mean after 2 years, because Aaron Rodgers essentially signed a 2-year deal, doesn't mean that after 2 years they won't go back to him and he might not be better because of it. But the likelihood is they're done with him. So I want to see how he performs. But anyway, I know you were being facetious, but anyway, Zach J, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. My guy Zach writes, what's good, Lou? Do you think, what's good, Zach? He says, do you think rookie Russell Wilson, 26 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 4 rushing touchdowns, 2 lost fumbles, is a realistic expectation to have for Howell this season? Yeah, something like that. Like my stat line is 28/9. All right. That's a 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. I think the 4 rushing touchdowns that you have are right around where Sam will be, somewhere in that neighborhood. He's going to fumble. He's going to throw some picks, as we know. He's going to turn the ball over a little bit. That's what young quarterbacks do. We saw the egregious interception he threw against Dallas where you go, what the hell were you thinking? Like, that's a part of the growing pains, right? It's going to happen. But we also saw how he responded in that game, how he played, how he battled back after the early mistake. So I think those are really reasonable expectations, those numbers that you put there from Russell Wilson's rookie campaign in 2012 with Seattle. And we'll see what happens. I think those are really, really realistic expectations. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Zach J. Got another super chat here from Video Channel. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, Video Channel writes, Lou, Video Channel. It's crazy to see an owner down with the fans and interacting with the crowd. So Josh Harris was out at practice again today. And look, he's a man of the people. I've seen a video where he was out, dancing with, I want to say it was like Jay-Z and several others. He was out having a good old time, having a ball. So he's not afraid to mix it up, man. He seems like a really down-to-earth dude that just, enjoys his, the opportunities that he's created for himself. And he's not afraid to have fun with it. Some people, they get a lot of money and they kind of get caught up in all of that. And he just seems like he's a down-to-earth dude at the end of the day. So I'm not surprised by any of that. Swaggy P, thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Been a member for 9 months. Says, love seeing this fan base being revived again. I just did a hit with Big Doug, and that video will be out at some point, whether it's today or tomorrow. And we talked about that, the energy that this fan base has again. We've been in the dark for so long and we've lacked hope. And I told you, a fan without hope is a hopeless fan. All right. If that makes any sense. I think I just said the same thing twice, but it sounds good though. A fan without hope is a hopeless fan, and fan is short for fanatic. You're supposed to talk crazy before the season starts. We weren't allowed to do that for over 20 years. We weren't allowed to talk reckless like everybody else. The fans that did, you'd look at them like, you must not have been a fan for this team very long. You couldn't have been a fan for more than a year or two, because you definitely wouldn't be talking reckless like that if you know what I know, if you've been through what I've been through. So anyway, it's just so good to see the fans coming back in droves. And here's the key. It's cool to have them coming back, because there are a lot of fans that said, until Snyder's gone, I'm not coming back. Those fans have come back. But there's still a huge conglomerate, huge contention of fans that are out there that you still can pull back in, but you're only going to tap into that fan base, that portion of the fan base, with winning. That's the only thing that's going to bring them back. So for as excited as we are now, you want it to even be better, win football games. And you'll see just how alive this fan base truly is. Because people know, those who know, who have been here long enough, know how rabid of a fan base this can be if you just win. So we'll see what happens. But I'm excited about the fans as well. So anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on day number 7 of Commanders Camp as we continue to chronicle camp each and every single day, talk about some of the highlights from camp, talk about the press conferences and what players and coaches had to say. Look forward to chopping it up with you again tomorrow at some point. Tomorrow's going to be a little bit different of a day. Normally we go live Thursday nights. I'm probably still going to be live, but it may not just be a Washington show. It'll probably be talking about, the Hall of Fame game. But it's less about the game itself and more about what it represents. The Hall of Fame game represents football being back and also representing that we will not be without football for the remainder of the year and the next 6 months, essentially. Between college football and the NFL, you're going to have football on your television every week after the Hall of Fame game, essentially. So that's what it represents. So we'll be live talking about that, but you'll see my face at some point tomorrow talking about camp and what day 8 was. Remember, not full pads tomorrow. They will be in helmets and shells tomorrow. Rivera said he's going to give them a break, and then they'll put the pads back on for Friday and Saturday's practices before having a day off on Sunday. So with that said, you guys have a great day. Look forward to chopping it up with you guys next time. Until then, take care. I got a quick comment here from Just Andre. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB for 18 months. Over a year for Just Andre, who writes, this Davis news I don't want to see. May or Bostic. Well, look, I don't know how that situation is going to ultimately go, but, he was at practice today. Jamin Davis made a play along with Cody Barton down by the goal line. He was in the backfield a couple of times. I personally think when this thing gets resolved, it's going to be in the offseason, and it won't affect him during the regular season, but I could be wrong. We will see. The league could even step in and suspend him as well. You know how they like to get involved in shit. So ultimately, we'll see what happens. I don't know, but I don't think Bostic is coming back this time around. Mayo he's already there, and he's going to make the team more likely than not. So I don't think that's going to change anything. But as long as you keep Bostic away from me, I think I'm fine. Because at least David Mayo serves a purpose. At least he serves a purpose. John Bostic doesn't, at this point. But anyway, I digress. You guys get out of here. Enjoy the rest of your day. And we will reconvene tomorrow talking about our beloved Washington Commanders. Until then, you know what it is. Post up. Take command. You guys have a great one. Take care.
LouieTeeNetwork.